Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. The purpose of this channel is educational, and particularly in regards to atheist and deconversion issues. And Bible, theology, politics, and other philosophical notions in relationship to those issues. Today is another Rabyd Ramblings, and I've discovered that Rabyd Ramblings tends to be a little bit better when it's inspired by some comment that I've had. And a recent small exchange kind of reminded me of how often this particular phenomenon happens, not on this channel, but in my life, especially when I talk about my atheism. It's a question of credibility. I am certain that as I make these videos, I am going to make mistakes. A couple things that people should know. One, I don't use a script. I did when I first started, and I found it cumbersome. I was always looking at the script instead of paying attention to what I was supposed to be doing. The other thing I don't do is I don't edit much. What you're getting here is pretty much a podcast. But you get to see my face. And so I don't really get into the whole idea of that I'm going to be flawless when I make these videos. But some people somehow think that that's supposed to be the case. A couple of things about this that people need to remember. And the way this usually goes down is something like this. You made mistake X, and it's really hard to take you seriously as a credible, discussioner or witness or whatever, when you make small mistakes like this. And I have to ask the question, do you judge everybody's opinion this harshly, that they can't have a single mistake or they destroy their credibility? If so, you should probably dismiss the Bible because it obviously has several mistakes in it. Maybe you should also dismiss every creationist, because every creationist site, website, organization makes massive mistakes on a massive basis. They misunderstand things. You should probably dismiss most of the apologists too, because they obviously on several occasions don't make any sense. They continue to use the same arguments, even though those arguments have been debunked. And they make continued misunderstandings of how evolution, abiogenesis, and cosmology work. They sometimes don't even make a distinction between the three. So if you're looking at a standard of a single mistake destroys a person's credibility, then trust me, you've lost a lot of what you're relying on, especially if you're a theist and a creationist. They have legions of mistakes, and you should probably now dismiss them based on your standard. What I think really happens there most of the time is people, if you don't agree with somebody, you already are going to consider them not credible, which is a mistake. You have to assume somebody's credible until they demonstrate otherwise, or you begin to look and see what they are actually capable of knowing. I think too many people, shall I say, look at confidence as to determine whether somebody is credible, and they also look at whether they agree with somebody out the gate in the first place. And I think those are two things that don't factor into credibility very often. A person be confidently foolish, and just because you agree with somebody doesn't mean they're right about something. That has another factor. One other thing that often I see is that people assume that a person may have knowledge and they don't clarify. I've seen people miss people's sense of humor. I just had that, recently in a video where I, said that Revelation looks like somebody that's, on LSD. It was a joke, but this person took it seriously. And this is the problem I think a lot of people have with understanding credibility. They assume confidence. Well, that guy's really confident. He must know what he's doing. I've seen confident people take bicycles, get on the roof, and try to jump to the other house and end up failing miserably because they lacked wisdom and understanding. They were certainly confident, but they were confidently wrong. I'm not trying to diminish people's understanding of confidence. Certainly, we like to follow confident leaders, but it doesn't mean a leader is credible. A credible source has something different to it. I don't know. I'm kind of speaking off the cuff here. I really haven't thought too much about this, except I've thought about it for the last 24 hours or so. What makes something credible? Well, first of all, I respect the credibility of somebody who's actually studied something out, more than somebody who's just speaking their opinion. In economics, we have these things called normative and positive statements. A normative statement is basically a statement of opinion. It's a statement of belief, opinion, something that, represents an opinion. Like one of the great ones right now that's being thrown is raising the minimum wage will make the economy better. That's an opinion, okay? It hasn't been demonstrated using economic law. A statement that is more positive is to restate, say, one of the laws of economics, such as the law of scarcity, that all resources possess scarcity, and therefore, are subject to the law of scarcity, is a positive statement, okay? Because it's based on economic law. Okay, when you invoke a descriptive law that's been proven time and time again, you're no longer making a normative statement, you're making a positive statement. And this is, I think, the issue. To me, when you look at somebody's credibility, they have based their stuff as much as possible in reality and show how they can do that with predictive power. When somebody makes a statement, that might be factually inaccurate, it doesn't really go to their credibility. The credibility is, okay, what is the body of knowledge that they know? And what do they present that shows that they have been credible over the long term? In other words, that their results have predictive power. Now, a lot of people say, well, what about science? Well, science is going to make a lot of mistakes, but they also correct those mistakes whenever they have happened, and they change their viewpoint based on other knowledge that is received. That's science. That's the way it works. And there's a humility to that. And I think my problem, with credible people is I think it's more credible to be humble and realize that you're wrong and you've made a mistake than it is to be confident and assert with boldness the same fact you've been repeating that's been debunked 1,000,000 times. To me, credibility is marked by a humility of willing to study something out that maybe you hold very sacred, but you're willing to study it out and go, maybe I was wrong about that. That's credible because you're not really saying that you're right. You're saying this is what you feel reality is until you're corrected. I had this argument with one other person, and the reason I'm putting it this way is because this is more goes to the heart of why people attack my credibility. Because they can't believe that somebody who spent so long as something would suddenly switch like I did. The problem is it wasn't a sudden switch. I usually have to correct that, that slowly but surely my faith took a beating from facts and reality. But it's also doesn't show a lack of credibility simply because I was humble enough to realize maybe all the things that I have been taught as a child and maybe all the things that I've been confidently asserting throughout my life weren't necessarily true. And to humble yourself and sit down and start looking at the opposite arguments, which is what I did. I started reading the Atheist. I started reading the Scientist. I started reading people who studied cosmology and, evolution and things like that, and came to very, very painful conclusions that they had better arguments, they had better data, and even though they would make mistakes in my mind, it didn't destroy my thoughts that they were a credible source, because people are going to make mistakes. I don't get the 100% standard. That's not what brings credibility. Not a 100%, you're always right. If that's the case, then there's not a single credible human being on the planet. Sooner or later, you're going to be wrong about something. There's just too much information out there to know for you not to act in ignorance and not act in some form of, incompetence, because you're not skilled enough to engage in certain things. I think there's two humbling things. And this is why I kept my kids in sports, because I wanted them to realize that there are limitations to their abilities. I have one child, my eldest, who loves sports, had a great dream that someday he would be as good a basketball player as Michael Jordan. The problem is that Edward is a very big young man, not in the sense of height, but just musculature. He's a big dude. Slowly but surely, he began to fight. Now, don't get me wrong. It was this fight that allowed him to get playing time on the basketball team and still do pretty well, but he was no Michael Jordan. And slowly but surely, he began to realize this. At the same time, playing in sports built his confidence, built his leadership ability, and things like that. But slowly, he began to push himself athletically into areas where he was actually good. And so he became a football player, he became a defensive lineman, an offensive lineman, and slowly but surely he found where his ability lies. And this is where ability, I think, comes into credibility too, is whether or not somebody has the ability to do their job that they're talking about. When somebody who may not always be the book smart comes up to me and has a lot of experience, shows me how to do something, I don't dismiss them because I think they're credible because they've done this a few times. Okay, so if you want to attack my credibility, here's the way you do it. One, you have to prove that I haven't studied this stuff out. Okay, and obviously, I've got a few degrees in my belt that says I have studied stuff. I have a biblical study degree, which I was very passionate about studying the Bible when I got it. That's a double major in ministry, so I understand what ministers and pastors go through. Plus, you add on that my 20 years of experience of being a pastor. I'm sorry, I know what pastors go through, and I know the reality of the pastoral ministry, at least from my perspective. That should at least count for something. I have a master's degree in theology. I've read a lot of theologians. I spent a lot of time reading people from different areas of theology, so I know how beliefs are developed and how they go forward. I have a political science degree, which, interestingly enough, people still don't respect because they think politics is some random thing, and it's not. There's a lot of things that go into it. So I have studied things. So when I speak on those subjects, I may not be perfect, but I have at least a way of finding out something. And I'm humble enough to admit that I'm wrong when I do research because I miss stuff. Nobody's perfect. And that's the thing that really gets me about religion, is religious people seem to want you to be flawless, and they're not flawless themselves. They'll sit there, and particularly Christians, and talk about the need for the grace of God because people aren't perfect. But then they turn right around and expect their opposition to be perfect with every argument, with every fact, with everything. And it's like, you do realize the contradiction there. You do realize the problem. Yeah. So my issue today, I guess, is to get people to understand that there's a great deal of difference between credibility and overconfidence. I don't try to be overconfident here. You see, I came to a painful conclusion that I didn't want to come to. I realized that I was wrong about theist beliefs. And it was because, as I studied all those other people, I found that their credibility was lacking. I didn't make my assumption on their credibility based on one fact that they got wrong. I made my decisions about credibility based on the fact that as I looked at the body of knowledge that they claim to know and their ability, to exercise and utilize that knowledge, to understand, to have basic intelligence about an issue, to understand an issue as it's really presented, I found both of those things to be lacking. This was particularly true with the apologists. Apologists speak very confidently. They have to, because the facts that they know, the body of knowledge that they have is inadequate. And quite frankly, most of them don't have the ability to really understand the arguments of the opposition to actually engage it, or they're being malicious. Now, I assume malice last. And usually I assume malice with people on the faith side of the spectrum when you've sat down and you've explained to them what the position that the scientist, the atheist, or the person who's a secularist actually believes, and then they still go on pontificating that you're wrong about that. But anybody's credibility on my side of the aisle isn't based on whether or not they get every fact right. And it's certainly not based on confidence. The position that I have to hold is a humble one. I think atheism humbles you. You're not the center of the universe anymore. You don't have a cosmic sugar daddy that's going to save your ass all the time. You don't have somebody that's going to give you supernatural powers to overcome your circumstances. What you have is a reality to deal with and a reality that you live in, and you have to humble yourself and figure out how to do that. It's not an easy road for me. It's also a hard sell. It's hard to sell no afterlife. It's hard to sell no cosmic sugar daddy saving your ass. It's hard to sell reality, and reality with predictive power. It really is, which also to me indicates it's harder to the truth. Why would anybody adopt a policy of, something that doesn't really have a lot of benefits other than they've studied it out and they've come to the right conclusion? Especially if you're a person like me, who after 40 years of being a Christian, after studying my faith to the nth degree, couldn't come up with any good or reasonable assertions that were true, and that the credibility of the Christian argument began to unravel the more you studied facts, reality, and how Christianity actually came to be. At this point, I have not much more to say other than if you're going to question my credibility, don't just do it on a single fact. Don't just do it because I don't seem confident about things. Actually, those are traits that I would expect. I would expect people to be ignorant from time to time. And I would expect people to lack confidence if they don't really know what the hell they're doing or they don't have the ability to do what they're doing. That's humility and coming to a realization that you either can't do something because you don't have the ability to do it, or you need to practice a little bit more so you get the ability to do it. That's all for today's Rabyd Ramblings. I just find this little side note about, credibility and things like that very interesting. I've now been accused of lacking credibility because I changed my view at least twice. And I've also been accused of lacking credibility because I didn't get one fact in one of my videos right. Neither one of those things undermines my credibility. In fact, I would say one of them is just a fact of reality. Sooner or later, I'm going to say something that's ignorant because I just don't know. Or I think I know it because I think I studied or remembered it somewhere, but I might be mistaken, or new information has come out that now makes me wrong. The best thing to do there is not to attack my credibility, because you're just attacking my character in some respects there too, but to point out my missteps or ask for clarification instead of automatically assuming that I'm just being an idiot. I don't do that to theists. I listen to them and I hear them out, and then I point out where they're wrong. But also, don't assume that just because I changed my mind, because I studied something out and looked at it very closely, somehow that undermines my credibility. What is it with theists who think that when you study something and look at the science of something, that somehow that undermines your credibility because whatever? I don't get it, still don't get it, and I probably never will. But in the meantime, I thank you all for coming by and stopping by the channel and listening to me ramble on for about 20 minutes about this subject. I appreciate the fact that you took the time to do that, and hopefully someday I can convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Ed Rabyd, also known as the Rabid Atheist, signing off and wishing you a good day.